Hi, I'm Ross from Airsoft, and today we're going to be talking about the Rapax Airsoft Sniper Springs. So, Rapax is a company based out of Europe that makes high-quality springs for airsoft sniper rifles. I have quite a few here in front of me, and we're going to be going over the different models as well as how they perform in our Silverback TAC-41 that I have here. So, to begin, we have the Modular Spring series here. We have their 2-jewel version, their 3-jewel version, and their 4-jewel version. The Modular Spring series is shorter than the Light Pull series as far as spring length goes, which gives you a harder pullback on the actual bolt. But you do get enhanced performance, and it is specifically designed with a heavier piston. Now, the Light Pull series, which is designed for lighter weight pistons and gives you a little bit of an easier pullback, are these guys here. And we have the 2+ jewel version, which is specifically built for UK fields and to stay within the UK field limit. And then we have the 2.8 version here, which is specifically built for US fields and staying within the USA's field limits. And then the 3+ jewel version here, which is for fields that are higher FPS than the previous two. And then finally, we have their high velocity spring, which advertises up to about 4.9 joules depending on your replica setup. So that is going to be your highest velocity spring, is the Hulk. All of these springs are 13mm diameter, which fits inside of our TAC-41 here, as well as other similar models. They are all electroplated to prevent rust, and they are made with high-grade spring wire, which are tested at 10,000 shots, so they shouldn't lose any strength over the course of you using your replica. Rapax also advertises that their springs have a lighter pull than normal springs, as well as minimizing that twang sound to create a more soft and subtle sounding spring when you fire it. Another really cool thing with these springs is that they are quite adjustable. They include in the modular spring these UP rings, which you add right to your spring guide rod, and that gives you a little bit of an extra spacer there that just kind of increases that compression and will increase your FPS variably by that. Alternatively, if you would like to decrease your FPS, you could either leave your bolt back for about 24 hours to just get some of that compression loss, or cut a ring or two off of your spring, and that'll decrease your FPS just so slightly. So those are two different ways you can kind of fine tune your FPS if you're either above or under your limit. So some things to go over with springs in general. Getting a good spring for your sniper rifle will come with having consistent FPS, durability, and different power variations depending on your field. So it is worth investing in a spring. It's probably the first thing you should replace in your stock sniper rifle to really get that power out of it that you want. And then from there, you can kind of fine tune how you want to adjust your sniper. The biggest thing as well is that when testing a sniper spring, you want to make sure that the hop up is set first and that you are using a heavyweight BB to really get the proper chrono read for your FPS on your sniper. So to start, before we install any of these springs here, I'm going to test the stock Silverback TAC-41 and just see where it's firing at. So let's head over to the chrono and see how it's shooting right now. So I'm chronoing with 0.48 gram BBs, and I already set the hop up prior to doing this. And we are getting joule readings at about 1.2 to 1.5. So we're sitting right around that 250 FPS mark with a 0.48 gram BB. And that is on the TAC-41 from Silverback, which is the stock spring that comes installed. All right, now that we have a baseline for the TAC-41, I'm going to start installing these springs going down the line, and we will see how they all perform compared to each other, and just kind of give you guys an understanding of how these springs are going to perform in your replica before purchasing it yourself and installing it. So the process for installing a spring in the TAC-41 is very simple. All you have to do is remove your bolt here, and then you take off your cylinder head, and then you will be met with your piston, your spring, and your spring guide rod. And all you really have to do is take your new spring and put it into that guide rod and reassemble it. As I said earlier, Rapax does offer these little spacers that you can put at the bottom of your spring guide rod, which can increase your FPS a little bit. I'm not going to be doing that or any fine tuning for these springs. I'm just going to be tossing them into the stock sniper and seeing what their FPS is at individually. We will be starting with the Rapax 2+ jewel spring. I'm just going to install it real quick into the Silverback here, and then take it over to the chrono, where it is firing at right above 2 joules at about 2.07 or 2.05, depending on the shot. which puts me right at around 300 FPS with a 4.8. So depending on your field regulations, you might have to cut a spring or two off, or honestly, this guy could probably just be compressed for 24 hours and you would drop down to 2 joules. All right, so now we have to take it back apart again, which we're gonna be doing quite a few times in this video. And we are going to be installing the 3+ joule spring this time. So just the same thing that we've done already. We're just gonna install that spring into the guide rod there and then take it to the chrono for firing. I found this guy was shooting at about 2.75 joules. So not quite at 3 joules. However, that is not very surprising considering the rest of the replica is stock. With a upgraded barrel, bucking, hop up, cylinder, you could definitely get your FPS pushing closer to 3 joules. However, with what I have in there currently, this is just where we're shooting at. All right, so now we are on to the 4+ joule spring, and these are the Modular spring series. And the Modular spring series is meant for heavy pistons. Of course, we are not using a heavy piston in this guy. It is the stock piston. So you will see some performance variation depending on your piston weight, as you would with any of the springs here. So it is chronoing at about 3.65 joules, which is about 400 FPS with a 4.8. So obviously it's not quite at the 4 joule mark, but as I said, that is all dependent on the other parts you have going into your sniper. This is really impressive for the stock Silverback TAC-41. I will say also that this spring was the hardest to pull back out of all the springs I tested. It definitely, I think the shorter length as well as the high joule velocity that it's rated for, it made it quite a strong pullback that I could see getting tiring on your arm after a long day of airsoft. We are now moving out of the Modular springs into the light pole series springs. So these are going to be longer springs with a bit more space between their coils. And this is the 2 joule version. We're going to take this over to the chrono now and see that it's firing right above 2 joules. So right where we want it at about 2.04, 2.02, bouncing around in that area. This spring is built for a lighter weight piston, and it's meant to have an easy pullback, which it did. So I was pretty pleased with where this guy was shooting just straight out of the box. So we are now going to install the 3+ joule spring from the lightweight pole series. We actually sold our 2.8 joule spring, so I don't have that to show you guys as an example. However, you can kind of imagine how it's going to perform in comparison. It's just going to sit between the former and the latter springs here. We are shooting at about 2.5 joules, around 330 to 340 FPS with a 4.8. And that is mainly just because of the build we have here and what's all going on internally, that it's not hitting that 3 joule mark. But it definitely steps it up from our 2 joule version. So depending on where you want your FPS to sit and what upgrades you have, you can kind of deduce your own conclusion from what spring you would want for FPS wise. So now the last spring that we are looking at is the Hulk spring. This is their high velocity spring, rated for 4+ joules. And the biggest thing with this spring that I noticed was that we have the largest amount of fall off on our FPS. That is very much likely because the system that we're working with here, being all stock internals, is just not keeping up with the amount of pressure that this spring can create. So we're kind of leaving off at a bit below 3 joules at about 2.8. And that is just the limit of this stock replica. So just to go over some of our findings. The stock TAC-41 Silverback sniper rifle was shooting at 1.4 joules, and that is their stock spring that comes installed in there. I know oftentimes they'll include a higher level spring, but that is just what came installed in the cylinder when we got it. So 1.4 joules, sitting around 250 FPS, and that is with a 4.8. So then going down the line, we had the 2+ Rapax spring here, which was firing at 2.05 joules, so right where it should be, right at that 2+ joule mark. We then had a bit of a drop off between our 3+ joule spring, which was only firing at 2.6 joules. So we had about a half a joule increase. However, we did not hit that 3 joule mark with that guy. And then our 4 joule spring, which got us up to 3.6 joules, the highest of all of our springs here. And that obviously has some drop off as well. It's not quite at 4 joules, but getting to 3.6 is honestly incredibly impressive for the stock Silverback. However, I will say that this guy did have the hardest pullback of them all. Pulling it back was definitely a little bit of a struggle, but it was still quite an impressive performing spring in a stock TAC-41 nonetheless. So out of the 3 modular springs here, the one that you're getting the most and highest FPS with is obviously the 4+ joule version, but depending on your system, you'll probably want to drop it down, get yourself within that FPS range, really get all of the power out of your springs that you can. The modular springs here worked very well. I was very pleased with how their pullback felt and how the firing system operated with them in it. And you obviously got that increase in joules per each spring. So that is just something to keep in mind. And then moving on to our light pull series here, we have these 2 guys. And the 2+ joule spring was shooting at right about 2.02 FPS, and the 3.1 was at 2.5. So pretty similar drop off to our modular springs, where we're losing about half a joule from the 3+ joule version. Just a limitation of our stock sniper. So no big deal there. And then finally, our Hulk, the high power spring here, which had the greatest drop off of them all at 2.7 joules. Which was interesting to me because the modular spring, both are rated for 4 joules. This one actually got us relatively close to 4 joules at 3.6, whereas this guy was a whole joule beneath it. But of course, the spring is not everything with the sniper rifle. As I said at the start of this video, the power you get behind your spring is going to do a lot in terms of your reach of your BB, but the accuracy, the compression, the force going into your BB is dictated by a lot more than just your spring. You're going to want a heavier piston, you're going to want a longer barrel. These are all things that can change the firing of your sniper rifle. Obviously, these are things I'm not getting into today. It is a rabbit hole of information that you could go down when it comes to getting your sniper performing the best you want it to. But I just thought I would take a look at these springs, and I was very pleased and impressed with how they performed and the variation I saw between them, just swapping it out of this stock replica here. So hopefully you can kind of take this information and use it while building your next sniper rifle, and think about, you know, where you want your power, what upgrades you want in it, and maybe if you're starting with a spring, what weight you'd want to start with first, and really get the most out of your replica. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching today. If you have any questions about the Rapax springs or sniper upgrades in general, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks.